The hospital room smelled like bleach and broken dreams. David sat in the uncomfortable plastic chair beside his best friend's bed, watching Tommy's chest rise and fall with each labored breath. The machines around them beeped softly, marking time like a countdown that nobody wanted to acknowledge. Tommy looked nothing like the guy who used to race motorcycles and climb trees without fear. Cancer had stolen his strength, his weight, and most of his hope. But his eyes still held that familiar spark of determination that David remembered from their childhood adventures. "You know what scares me most?" Tommy whispered, his voice barely audible above the humming machines. "It's not dying. I've made peace with that." David leaned forward, gripping the metal rail of the hospital bed. "Then what is it, man?" "Elena." Tommy's eyes filled with tears. "My sister. She's got nobody left but me, and I'm about to leave her completely alone." David had heard about Elena over the years, but had never actually met her. Tommy talked about his younger sister sometimes, usually with a mix of pride and worry. She was studying to be a nurse while working multiple jobs. She lived in a tiny apartment across town. She never asked for help, even when she desperately needed it. "She's tough," Tommy continued, struggling to sit up slightly. "Tougher than both of us combined. But tough doesn't pay rent. Tough doesn't fix a broken car or cover medical bills." The room fell quiet except for the steady beeping of monitors. David watched his friend's face, seeing a pain there that had nothing to do with the cancer eating away at his body. "Tell me about her," David said gently. Tommy's expression softened, and for a moment he looked almost peaceful. "She was only 16 when our parents died in that factory fire. You remember that accident at the steel plant about 10 years ago? The one that made the news?" David nodded. He vaguely remembered the headlines about safety violations and the families affected. Elena was working there part-time during summer break, just filing papers and cleaning offices, you know? Kid stuff. But when the explosion happened, she was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Tommy paused, gathering strength. The left side of her face and neck got burned pretty bad. Spent months in the hospital, lost most of her hair on that side. Skin. Grafts, surgeries, the whole nightmare. David felt his stomach tighten. He couldn't imagine going through something so traumatic at such a young age. "But here's the thing," Tommy continued, his voice getting stronger as he talked about his sister. "She never complained, not once. While she was recovering, she was already talking about becoming a nurse. Said she wanted to help other people who were going through what she went through." "That's incredible," David said, meaning it. "She put herself through high school while working nights at a diner. Got a scholarship to community college but had to turn it down because she couldn't afford the books and supplies. Instead, she took a job cleaning offices at the hospital and started taking night classes whenever she could scrape together the money." Tommy reached for the water cup on his bedside table with shaking hands. David quickly helped him take a sip. "I tried to help her over the years, but my construction work barely covered my own expenses. And she's too proud to take money anyway, always has been. Says she doesn't want charity from anyone, including me." David understood that kind of pride. His own family had struggled when he was younger, before he got into tech, and his life changed completely. The determination to make it on your own, to prove you didn't need handouts. He remembered that feeling. "She's 26 now," Tommy said. "Still living in the same rundown apartment complex. Still working at the hospital, still taking classes when she can afford them. Still dreaming of becoming a nurse someday. But David, at the rate she's going, it'll take her another decade to finish school. And that's if nothing goes wrong. If her car doesn't break down, if she doesn't get sick, if the rent doesn't go up again." The weight of what Tommy was saying settled over David like a heavy blanket. This wasn't just about losing a friend. This was about a young woman whose entire future hung by a thread, and the thread was about to snap. "I've been lying here for weeks, thinking about what's going to happen to her when I'm gone," Tommy said, his voice breaking slightly. "She doesn't have anyone else. No aunts, no uncles, no cousins. Our parents were only children, and both sets of grandparents died when we were kids. It's just been Elena and me for 10 years, and now it's going to be just Elena." David watched. His friends struggled with emotions that were clearly overwhelming him. Tommy had always been the protector, even when they were kids. He was the one who stood up to bullies, who made sure everyone got home safely after their adventures. The idea of leaving his sister vulnerable was clearly destroying him. "What can I do?" David asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to hear the answer. Tommy turned to look at him directly, his eyes bright with fever and desperation. "I know this is crazy. I know it's asking too much. But you're the only person I trust. David, you're the only one who's made something of himself, who has the resources to actually help her." David's heart started beating faster. He had a feeling he knew where this conversation was heading, and it terrified him. "She needs security," Tommy continued. "She needs someone who can give her the stability to finish school, to build the life she's been fighting for. She needs health insurance, a safe place to live, and someone who won't abandon her when things get difficult." The room seemed to shrink around them. David felt the weight of his friend's expectations pressing down on him. "Tommy, marry her," Tommy said quickly, before David could finish his protest. "I know how it sounds, I know it's insane. But hear me out." David's mouth went dry. "You want me to marry your sister? A woman I've never even met? You're successful. You've got that software company doing well? You own your own house, you've got health insurance and a steady income. And more than that, you're a good person. I've known you for 20 years, David. I know you wouldn't hurt her." "But Tommy, marriage isn't just about financial security. What about love? What about compatibility? What if we can't stand each other?" Tommy smiled weakly. "Elena doesn't believe in fairy tale romance anyway. She's too practical for that. She's spent her whole adult life focused on survival and goals. If you offered her a partnership, a real legal marriage that would give her the stability she needs to achieve her dreams, she might actually consider it." David stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights below. Cars moved through the streets like tiny ants, everyone going somewhere, everyone with their own problems and dreams and fears. Somewhere out there was a woman named Elena, who had no idea that her brother was asking his best friend to completely change both their lives. "I'm not asking you to fall in love with her," Tommy said from behind him. "I'm asking you to give her a chance at the life she deserves. And who knows? Maybe you'll both find something you didn't know you were looking for." David turned back to face his dying friend. Tommy's face was pale and drawn, but his eyes held a hope that David hadn't seen in weeks. "Promise me," Tommy whispered. "Promise? Me you'll at least meet her. Promise me you'll consider it. I can't die knowing she's going to struggle alone for the rest of her life." The machines continued their steady beeping. Somewhere down the hall, a nurse was talking quietly to another family. Life was continuing all around them, but in this moment, David felt like the entire world had stopped. He looked at his best friend, the person who had stood by him through childhood adventures and teenage mistakes, through college stress and early career struggles. Tommy had never asked him for anything big before. And now he was asking for everything. "Okay," David heard himself say. "I promise." 3 weeks had passed since Tommy's funeral, and David still couldn't get his friend's last words out of his head. Every morning, he woke up thinking about the promise he'd made. Every night he stared at the ceiling, wondering how he was supposed to approach a complete stranger and change both their lives forever. The address Tommy had given him led to a part of the city David rarely visited. As he drove through the narrow streets lined with old apartment buildings and small shops with faded signs, he realized how sheltered his suburban life had become. His own neighborhood had manicured lawns and coffee shops on every corner. This area had broken sidewalks and bars on windows. He parked outside a 4-story brick building that had seen better days decades ago. The paint was peeling and one of the front steps was cracked down the middle. A handwritten sign taped to the front door listed apartment numbers and surnames in different colored pens, as if tenants came and went frequently. Elena Rodriguez. Apartment 3B. David checked the paper in his hand twice before climbing the stairs. The hallway smelled like cooking oil and old carpet. Someone was playing music too loudly on the second floor, and he could hear a baby crying somewhere above him when he reached the 3rd floor. David paused outside 3B. What was he supposed to say? Hi, I'm your dead brother's friend, and I'm here to propose marriage to solve your financial problems. The whole thing sounded insane even in his own head. He knocked softly, then waited. Nothing. He knocked again, a little louder this time. Just a minute, came a voice from inside. It was tired but clear, with a slight accent that reminded him of Tommy's way of speaking. The door opened just a crack, secured by a chain lock. David could see part of a face peering out at him, one dark brown eye, a section of black hair pulled back and smooth tan skin. Can I help you? The voice asked, cautious and guarded. Are you Elena? Elena Rodriguez? The eye narrowed slightly. Who's asking? My name is David. David Martinez. I was a friend of your brother Tommy's. The door closed completely for a moment. David heard the chain being removed, and then it opened wider. Now he could see her fully, and his breath caught in his throat. Elena was smaller than he'd expected. Maybe 5'4", with long black hair tied back in a simple ponytail. She was wearing scrubs, the kind nurses and hospital workers wore, in a faded blue color that looked like it had been washed hundreds of times. Her face was heart-shaped and would have been beautiful by any standard, except for the silvery white scars that covered the left side from her temple down to her neck. The scarred skin was smooth but clearly different from the rest, creating an unusual pattern that caught the light. It looked like water flowing down the side of her face and neck, disappearing beneath the collar of her scrubs. But what struck David most were her eyes. They were exactly like Tommy's, dark and intelligent and full of determination. David Martinez, she repeated, studying his face. Tommy mentioned you a few times over the years. You're the computer guy, right? The one who started his own company? Software development, yes. David felt awkward standing in the hallway. I'm sorry about your brother. I know this is probably a difficult time, but I was hoping we could talk. Elena's expression became more guarded. Talk about what? About Tommy, about some things he asked me to do. It's complicated. She looked him up and down, taking in his clean khakis, button-down shirt, and expensive sneakers. David suddenly felt overdressed and out of place. I just got home from work. Elena said finally, I've got about an hour before I need to leave for my evening classes. You can come in, but I'm not sure what there is to talk about. She stepped aside and David entered her apartment. It was smaller than his walk-in closet at home, but it was clean and organized. A tiny kitchen opened directly into a living room that contained a futon, a small table, and a bookshelf made from boards and concrete blocks. Medical textbooks were stacked everywhere, on the table, on the floor, on top of the refrigerator. Sorry about the mess, Elena said, though the apartment wasn't messy at all. I'm studying for finals. David looked around, trying not to stare. You're in nursing school? Community college. I'm trying to finish my prerequisites so I can apply to the nursing program next year. She gestured toward the futon. You can sit if you want. Can I get you some water or something? That's about all I have. Water would be great, thanks. Elena moved to the kitchen, which was only a few steps away. David noticed that she moved carefully, favoring her left side slightly. When she reached up to get a glass from the cabinet, he saw that the scarring extended down her arm as well. She handed him the water and sat on the other end of the futon, tucking her legs under her. So what did my brother ask you to do? David took a sip of water, buying himself time. He was worried about you, about what would happen to you after he was gone. Elena's face hardened. I can take care of myself. I've been doing it just fine for 10 years. I know. He told me how strong you are, how hard you've been working. He was proud of you. For just a moment, Elena's tough expression softened. He shouldn't have been worrying about me when he was so sick. I told him 100 times that I'd be okay. But he did worry. He loved you. I know he did. Elena's voice became quiet. But that doesn't mean I need some stranger coming to check on me like I'm a charity case. David felt like he was walking through a minefield. Every word seemed to make things worse. That's not why I'm here. Well, not exactly. Then why are you here, David? Because no offense, but we don't know each other. Tommy's gone and I'm dealing with that in my own way. I don't need someone swooping in to fix my life because they feel guilty. The directness of her words stung because they were partially true. David did feel guilty. Guilty that his life was so comfortable while hers was so difficult. Guilty that he'd made a promise he wasn't sure he could keep. Guilty that he was sitting in her tiny apartment wearing clothes that probably cost more than her monthly rent. You're right, he said. We don't know each other. But Tommy asked me to look out for you, and I promised him I would. Look out for me how? Elena's voice had an edge to it now. Are you planning to slip me some cash, set up a scholarship fund? Help the poor girl with the ugly scars get back on her feet? The scars aren't ugly, David said without thinking. Elena's hand automatically went to the left side of her face, a gesture that seemed unconscious. You don't have to say that. I'm not just saying it, I mean it. They stared at each other for a moment. David could see walls going up behind Elena's eyes, defenses that had probably taken years to build. Look, she said, standing up. I appreciate that Tommy asked you to check on me. I really do, but I don't need help. I've got a job, I'm paying my bills, and I'm working toward my goals. It's slow going, but I'm getting there. David looked around the apartment again, noticing details he'd missed before. The medical textbooks were all used, with highlighted passages and handwritten notes in the margins. There was a small stack of bills on the kitchen counter, and he could see past due stamps on at least 2 of them. The refrigerator was nearly empty except for some eggs, bread, and what looked like leftovers in a plastic container. Tommy told me you want to be a nurse, David said. I'm going to be a nurse, Elena corrected. Eventually, how long will it take? Elena sat back down, but farther away from him this time. At the rate I'm going, maybe 5 more years. I can only afford to take 1 or 2 classes per semester. And you're working where? Hospital downtown, 3rd shift cleaning crew. And I pick up extra shifts in the laundry when they need help. David did quick math in his head. Community college classes, even at the cheapest school in the city, would cost thousands per semester. Working as cleaning staff at a hospital probably paid just above minimum wage. Rent in even this rundown building had to be at least several hundred a month. Elena, he said carefully, what if there was a way for you to finish school faster? She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Unless you're about to offer me a full scholarship and a trust fund, I don't see how. David took a deep breath. This was it. The moment he'd been dreading and thinking about for 3 weeks. Actually, he said, I'm about to offer you something. But it's not a scholarship or a trust fund. It's something much more complicated. Elena tilted her head, studying his face. What are you talking about? Tommy asked me to marry you. The words hung in the air between them like a bomb that hadn't exploded yet. Elena stared at him for a long moment, her expression completely unreadable. Then she started laughing. Not the bitter laugh from before, but genuine, shocked laughter that seemed to surprise even her. I'm sorry, she said, wiping her eyes. Did you just say my dying brother asked you to marry me? Yes. And you're here because you're actually considering it? Yes. Elena stopped laughing. She looked at David like she was seeing him for the first time, trying to figure out if he was serious or completely insane. You don't even know me, she said finally. No, I don't. We could hate each other. We could. This is the craziest thing I've ever heard, I know. Elena stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the street below. David watched her silhouette against the afternoon light, seeing the proud set of her shoulders and the way she held herself despite everything. She'd been through. Get out, she said quietly. Elena. 2 weeks passed after Elena slammed the door in David's face, and he couldn't stop thinking about her angry eyes and proud shoulders. He'd replayed their conversation 100 times, wondering if he could have said things differently. Maybe he shouldn't have been so direct. Maybe he should have gotten to know her first before dropping Tommy's crazy request on her like a bomb, but life had other plans. David was working late at his office when his phone rang. The number wasn't familiar, but something made him answer it anyway. David, this is Elena. Her voice sounded different, smaller, tired, like she'd been crying. Elena, are you okay? There was a long pause. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. David set down his coffee and gave her his full attention. Okay, that crazy proposal you made, were you serious about it? David's heart started beating faster. Yes, completely serious. Another pause. If I said yes, what would that actually look like? Like the details. How would it work? David could hear traffic in the background and realized she was probably calling from outside somewhere. Are you somewhere safe? Do you want to meet and talk about this properly? I'm at the hospital. I get off work in an hour. There's a diner across the street called Rosie's. Do you know it? I'll find it. Elena, is everything okay? Just meet me there in an hour. And David? Don't get your hopes up. I'm just asking questions. The line went dead, leaving David staring at his phone and wondering what had changed in the past 2 weeks. Rosie's diner was exactly what David expected: red vinyl booths, black and white checkered floors, and the smell of coffee and fried food. He arrived early and chose a booth in the back, ordering coffee while he waited and tried to calm his nerves. Elena walked in 20 minutes later, still wearing her hospital scrubs. She looked exhausted, and David noticed she was walking more carefully than before, like she was in pain. When she slid into the booth across from him, he could see dark circles under her eyes. Long shift? He asked. 16 hours. Had to cover. For someone who called in sick. Elena signaled the waitress for coffee. Again. When the waitress brought her coffee, Elena wrapped her hands around the mug like she was trying to warm herself up, even though the diner was hot. So, without looking at him, my landlord came by yesterday. David waited, sensing there was more to the story. Rent's going up, again, $50 a month starting next month. Elena finally looked at him, and her eyes were filled with a mixture of anger and exhaustion. That might not sound like much to you, but it's the difference between eating and not eating for me. David felt his stomach clench. I'm sorry, and this morning, my car wouldn't start. The mechanic says it needs a new transmission. $800. Elena laughed bitterly. Might as well be $8,000. I don't have it. Elena, I'm not done. She held up her hand. I failed my anatomy exam last week. Failed it because I've been working so many extra shifts that I couldn't study, and I need to retake it, which means paying for the class again. Another $300 I don't have. David watched her struggle with emotions that were clearly overwhelming her. This proud, strong woman was being crushed by circumstances beyond her control, and it was killing him to see it. So, I've been thinking about what you said, Elena continued. About Tommy wanting you to look out for me. About options and difficult choices. She took a shaky breath. Tell me exactly what you had in mind. David leaned forward, choosing his words carefully. A real marriage, legal papers, shared last name, everything official. You'd move into my house, which would solve your housing problem immediately. You'd be on my health insurance, which is really good. And you could quit the night job and focus on school full-time? Elena's eyes narrowed. And in exchange? Nothing. I mean, we live in the same house, but you'd have your own space. Your own room, your own bathroom. We'd be roommates who happen to be legally married. What about when I finish school? What happens then? David had thought about this constantly over the past 2 weeks. That would be up to you. If you want to stay married, we stay married. If you want a divorce so you can find someone you actually love, we get divorced. No hard feelings either way. Elena stared at him for a long moment. Why would you do this? What do you get out of it? It was the question David had been asking himself since the moment he'd left her apartment. Why was he willing to completely change his life for a woman he barely knew? Honestly, I don't know if I can explain it in a way that makes sense. David ran his hands through his hair. Tommy was my best friend. He saved my life once when we were kids, literally pulled me out of a river when I fell through the ice. I never got to pay him back for that. So this is about guilt. Maybe partly, but it's more than that. David struggled to find the right words. I have this comfortable life, and you're struggling for things that should be basic rights. Education? Healthcare, safe housing. It doesn't seem fair. Life isn't fair, Elena said quietly. No, it's not. But sometimes people can make it a little more fair for each other. Elena was quiet for several minutes, staring into her coffee cup. David could practically see the wheels turning in her head, weighing options and consequences. If I said yes, she said finally, there would have to be rules. David's heart jumped. Okay, what kind of rules? First, this stays purely business. No romantic expectations, no pretending to be a happy couple for other people. We're partners in a practical arrangement, nothing more. Agreed. Second, I pay my own way as much as possible. I'll get a part-time job to cover my personal expenses. I'm not looking for a sugar daddy. That's fine, but you don't have to. Yes, I do. Elena's voice was firm. I need to contribute something or I'll feel like a kept woman. David nodded. What else? Third, we tell people the truth. Not the whole truth, but we don't lie about how we met or pretend we've been madly in love for years. If anyone asks, we say we met through Tommy and decided to help each other out. That works. Elena took a sip of her coffee, and David could see her hands were shaking slightly. Fourth, either one of us can end this arrangement at any time, for any reason. No questions asked, no guilt trips, of course. And fifth, Elena paused, looking uncomfortable. We keep separate bedrooms, permanently. This isn't going to turn into some romance movie where we gradually fall in love and live happily ever after. David felt a small stab of something, disappointment, but pushed it aside. Separate bedrooms. Got it. Elena leaned back in the booth, studying his face. You realize this is insane, right? People don't just marry strangers to solve financial problems. Maybe they should more often. Might solve a lot of problems. Despite everything, Elena smiled slightly. It was the first time David had seen her really smile, and it transformed her entire face. For a moment, he could see past the exhaustion and stress to the person she might be under different circumstances. I have one more question, Elena said. And I need you to be completely honest. Okay. Are you doing this because you feel sorry? For me? Because you think the girl with the scars needs rescuing? David met her eyes directly. I'm not going to pretend the scars don't exist, Elena, but they're not why I'm here. I'm here because Tommy believed you were worth fighting for, and after meeting you, I can see why. You're working 2 jobs and going to school and still helping other people. You're stronger than most people I know, scars or no scars. Elena's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back quickly. Don't make me out to be some kind of saint. I'm not. I'm not looking for a saint. I'm looking for a partner who can handle a complicated situation with dignity and intelligence. From what I've seen, you qualify. Elena was quiet for another long moment. David could hear the sounds of the diner around them, conversations at other tables, the sizzle of food on the grill, the clink of dishes being cleared. Normal sounds of normal people living normal lives. What they were discussing was anything but normal. If we do this, Elena said finally, when would it happen? As soon as possible. We could go to the courthouse tomorrow if you want. Tomorrow? Elena's eyes widened. I know it's fast, but your rent's due next week, right? And you said your car needs to be fixed. The sooner we make this official, the sooner we can start solving these immediate problems. Elena stared at him like she was trying to see inside his head. You're really serious about this. Dead serious. And you're not going to change your mind tomorrow morning and decide this was all a huge mistake. David thought about Tommy's face. In that hospital room, about the promise he'd made, about Elena's determination to build a better life despite every obstacle. I'm not going to change my mind. Elena took a deep breath and let it out slowly. Okay, I'll marry you. Elena's voice was steady, but David could see the fear in her eyes. God help us both, but I'll do it. David felt a rush of relief and terror and something else he couldn't quite identify. Are you sure? No, Elena said honestly. I'm not sure about anything. But I'm tired of being stuck, and this might be my only chance to get unstuck. So, yes, I'm sure enough. They sat in silence for a moment, both apparently trying to process what they'd just agreed to do. So, Elena said finally, I guess we should exchange phone numbers and figure out the logistics. The courthouse wedding took exactly 17 minutes. Elena wore a simple black dress she'd borrowed from her neighbor, and David had on his best suit. There were no flowers, no music, no family members cheering in the background. Just two strangers standing in front of a tired-looking judge, promising to honor each other in a marriage that felt more like a business transaction than a romantic commitment. When the judge said, "You may kiss the bride," they both froze for a moment before David gave Elena a quick, awkward peck on the cheek. The whole thing felt surreal, like they were actors in a play they hadn't properly rehearsed for. "Congratulations," the judge said, handing them their marriage certificate. "Next couple, please." And just like that, Elena Rodriguez became Elena Martinez. The drive to David's house was quiet. Elena sat in the passenger seat of his car, staring out the window as they left the city center and drove into the suburbs. The neighborhoods got progressively nicer, with bigger houses, wider driveways, and lawns that looked like they belonged in magazines. "You okay?" David asked when they stopped at a red light. "Just processing," Elena said. "This morning I was single and broke. Now I'm married and about to move into a house that probably costs more than I've made in my entire life." David glanced at her. "Having second thoughts?" "Every few minutes, but I'm still here." When they pulled into David's driveway, Elena's eyes widened. The house was a two-story colonial with white shutters, a wraparound porch, and a front yard that looked like it belonged on a postcard. It was the kind of house she'd driven past her whole life but never imagined actually living in. "It's not as fancy as it looks," David said, noticing her expression. "I bought it as a fixer-upper 3 years ago. Still working on most of the rooms." Elena followed him up the front steps, carrying the single suitcase that contained everything she owned. David had offered to help her pack, but she'd insisted on doing it herself. It had taken her exactly 20 minutes to fit her entire life into one bag. Inside, the house was warm and comfortable without being flashy. The living room had a big sectional couch, a coffee table covered with tech magazines, and a TV mounted on the wall. The kitchen was modern, but clearly used by someone who actually cooked, not just for show. "Your room is upstairs," David said, leading her up a staircase lined with family photos. Elena caught glimpses of David as a kid, graduation pictures, photos with Tommy at various ages. It has its own bathroom, and there's a desk if you want to study in there. The bedroom was bigger than Elena's entire apartment had been. It had a double bed with a blue comforter, a dresser, a desk by the window, and enough closet space for 10 times the clothes she owned. "This is too much," Elena said quietly. "It's just an extra room. I work from home most days, so I was using it as storage anyway." David set her suitcase on the bed. "Take your time getting settled. I'll be downstairs if you need anything." After David left, Elena sat on the edge of the bed and looked around. Everything was clean and comfortable and completely foreign. The mattress was softer than any bed she'd ever slept in. The window looked out over a backyard with actual grass and trees. She could hear birds singing outside. It felt like stepping into someone else's life. Elena unpacked her few belongings, which looked ridiculous scattered around such a large space. Her 3 pairs of jeans, handful of t-shirts, and single dress made the dresser look practically empty. Her toiletries barely filled one corner of the bathroom counter. The desk was positioned perfectly for studying, with good light from the window and enough space for all her textbooks. Elena ran her fingers over the smooth wood surface and imagined actually having time to sit here and study without worrying about her next shift starting in a few hours. When she came back downstairs, David was in the kitchen making sandwiches. "Hungry?" he asked. "I wasn't sure what you liked, so I just made turkey and cheese." "That's perfect, thank you." Elena sat at the kitchen table, which was big enough for 6 people. "David, this house is beautiful. You know that, right?" David shrugged. "It's comfortable. That's what matters. How long have you lived here?" 3 years. Bought it right after my company started doing well." David brought the sandwiches to the table along with 2 glasses of water. "It was a mess when I got it. Previous owners had let everything fall apart. I've been fixing it up room by room." Elena took a bite of her sandwich and realized she was starving. She'd been too nervous to eat breakfast, and the stress of the morning had left her feeling hollow. "What kind of software does your company make?" "Mostly custom applications for small businesses. Inventory management, customer databases, that kind of thing. Nothing too exciting, but it pays the bills." "More than pays the bills from the looks of this place." David looked uncomfortable. "I've been lucky. Right place at the right time." Elena could tell he was downplaying his success, probably trying not to make her feel worse about her own situation. It was thoughtful, but it also reminded her of how different their worlds were. "So what happens now?" Elena asked. "I mean, day to day, how does this work?" "Whatever feels natural, I guess. I usually work from my home office upstairs. You're welcome to use the living room for studying or the kitchen table or wherever you're comfortable. There's a bus stop at the end of the street if you need to get to campus." "What about groceries, household stuff?" "We can figure that out as we go. I usually just buy whatever I need when I need it." David paused. "Elena, I want you to know you don't have to hide in your room or anything. This is your house now, too." The words felt strange. Elena had never lived anywhere that felt truly hers, not since her parents died. Even her apartment had always felt temporary, like she was just camping there until something better came along. "What do you do for fun?" Elena asked, changing the subject. David thought about it. "I read a lot, watch movies. Sometimes I work on the house. I'm not exactly a party animal." "Do you have friends? People who might come over?" "A few college friends, some guys from work. But I don't entertain much." David studied her face. "Are you worried about people asking questions?" "A little. I mean, we just got married and we barely know each other. People are going to think it's weird. We'll tell them what we agreed on, that we met through Tommy and decided to help each other out. If they want to read romance into it, that's their problem." Elena nodded, but she was already imagining the conversations. People would assume David had rescued her, that she was some kind of charity case he'd taken pity on. The thought made her stomach tight with embarrassment. "Elena," David said gently, "what are you thinking about?" "Just wondering what people will say when they see us together. The successful guy and the girl with the scars who obviously doesn't belong in his world." David's expression grew serious. "Anyone who thinks that isn't worth knowing anyway. Easy for you to say. You've never had people stare at you in restaurants or whisper behind your back?" "You're right, I haven't." David leaned forward. "But I'm about to find out what it's like, because if people are going to judge you, they're going to judge me too. For marrying someone I supposedly just met, for whatever crazy reasons they think I might have." Elena hadn't considered that. David was risking his reputation too, in his own way. "I keep thinking Tommy would laugh at us if he could see this," Elena said. "Why?" "Because he always said I was too stubborn for my own good, that I'd rather struggle alone than accept help from anyone. And here I am, married to his best friend because I finally got desperate enough to say yes." "You're not desperate, you're practical. There's a difference." Elena wasn't sure she believed that, but it was a nicer way to think about it. They spent the rest of the afternoon working out logistics. David showed Elena how to work the washing machine and dryer, gave her a key to the house, and added her to his cell phone plan. He handed her a credit card with her new name on it for emergencies and essentials. "I ordered this online yesterday," he said when Elena stared at the card in shock. "Figured you'd need it for textbooks and supplies." "David, this is too much. Elena, you're my wife now. Legally, my financial responsibility. Let me handle the money stuff, okay? You focus on school." The word wife sounded foreign coming from his mouth. Elena looked down at the simple gold band on her finger. They'd bought the cheapest rings they could find at a jewelry store near the courthouse. It felt heavier than it should have, like a reminder of promises she wasn't sure either of them could keep. That evening, Elena sat at the kitchen table with her anatomy textbook spread out in front of her. For the first time in months, she wasn't exhausted. She wasn't thinking about her next shift or how she was going to pay rent. She was just studying the way students were supposed to. David was in the living room, working on his laptop with the TV on low in the background. Every so often, Elena would hear him typing or turning pages. It was comfortable and domestic in a way that surprised her. Around 10 o'clock, David appeared in the kitchen doorway. "I'm going to head up to bed," he said. "You're welcome to stay. Up as late as you want. Just turn off the lights when you're done. Okay, good night." "Good night, Elena." After he went upstairs, Elena stayed at the table for another hour, reading about muscle groups and bone structures. The house was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional sound of David moving around upstairs. 6 months into their strange marriage, Elena and David had settled into a routine that worked surprisingly well. Elena took a full course load at school for the first time in years, while David worked from his home office upstairs. They shared coffee in the mornings, ate dinner together most evenings, and lived like careful roommates who happened to share the same last name. Elena had just finished her hardest semester yet, organic chemistry, advanced anatomy, and medical terminology. All at once. She'd studied harder than ever before, staying up late at the kitchen table with textbooks spread around her like a fortress. For the first time since starting college, she wasn't working a second job, wasn't counting every dollar, wasn't falling asleep over her notes from exhaustion. She'd aced every exam, the day before her final test. Elena was reviewing notes when she heard David's phone ring upstairs. His voice carried down through the old house, something about a presentation deadline being moved up, stress in his tone that she hadn't heard before. Elena had learned to read David's moods over the past months. He was usually calm and steady, the kind of person who planned everything and rarely got flustered. But lately, he'd been different, tense, distracted. He'd mentioned something about his company bidding on a big contract, but Elena didn't know the details. That evening, David came downstairs looking exhausted. His hair was messy from running his hands through it, and he had that glazed look of someone who'd been staring at a computer screen for too long. "Rough day?" Elena asked from the kitchen where she was making dinner. She'd started cooking more often, partly because she felt like she should contribute something to the household, and partly because she'd discovered she actually enjoyed it. "You could say that." David slumped into a chair at the kitchen table. "We're presenting to Johnson Industries next week. It's the biggest contract we've ever gone after. Could triple our revenue if we get it." "That sounds amazing." "It would be if I don't completely mess it up." David rubbed his face with both hands. "I'm not good at presentations, never have been. I can write code all day, but put me in front of a room full of executives and I turn into a stuttering mess." Elena had never seen David doubt himself before. In the months they'd lived together, he'd always seemed confident and capable. She'd started to think of him as someone who had everything figured out. "What's the presentation about?" she asked, bringing 2 plates of food to the table. "Custom inventory management system. It's actually really cool. It would help them track everything from raw materials to finished products in real time. Could save them millions in waste and inefficiency." David's eyes lit up as he talked about the technical aspects, and Elena could see his passion for his work. But then his shoulders sagged again. "The problem is making them see how cool it is. I'll probably just bore them with technical details they don't care about." Elena sat down across from him. "Can I see the presentation?" David looked surprised. "You want to look at software specs? It's pretty dry stuff. I might understand more than you think. I've been taking a lot of science classes, remember? And I work in a hospital. I see inefficient systems every day." After dinner, David brought his laptop to the kitchen table and showed Elena his presentation. She was right. She did understand more than he'd expected. But she also immediately saw the problem. "You're leading with the technical specifications," Elena said after scrolling through several slides. "Those are the important parts. To you, maybe, but these executives probably don't care how the software works. They care about what it does for them." Elena had spent years dealing with people, hospital patients, doctors, administrators, classmates from all different backgrounds. She'd learned how to explain complex medical procedures to scared families, how to advocate for better working conditions with stubborn supervisors. "Start with a story," she suggested. "Tell them about a real problem first. Make them feel the frustration of losing money because they can't track their inventory properly. Then show them how your software fixes that problem. David stared at her. You think that would work better? I think people connect with stories, not statistics. Even business people. They spent the next 3 hours reworking David's presentation. Elena asked questions that forced him to explain things in simple terms. She helped him reorganize the slides to tell a story instead of just listing features. She even suggested adding some visual examples to make the abstract concepts more concrete. You're really good at this, David said as they finished up around midnight. I'm good at explaining things. Comes from working with patients. Elena closed the laptop. You should practice the presentation out loud. Want me to be your audience? You do that? Of course, we're partners, right? The word hung in the air between them. They'd been careful to keep their relationship businesslike, but somewhere along the way, they'd actually become partners in ways Elena hadn't expected. The next morning, Elena sat through David's practice presentation 3 times, offering suggestions and encouragement. She helped him anticipate questions the executives might ask and coached him on making eye contact instead of staring at his slides. You've got this, she told him as he prepared to leave for the actual presentation. Just remember, they need what you're offering. You're not begging for their business, you're solving their problems. David was gone for most of the day. Elena tried to focus on studying for her final exam, but she found herself checking the clock and wondering how the presentation was going. It surprised her how much she cared about David's success. When David came home that evening, Elena was waiting in the living room trying to read, but mostly just listening for his car in the driveway. How did it go? She asked the moment he walked through the door. David's face was unreadable for a moment. Then he broke into the biggest smile Elena had ever seen from him. We got it, he said. They signed the contract today. Said it was the best presentation they'd seen all year. Elena jumped up from the couch without thinking and hugged him. It was the first time they'd had any physical contact since their awkward wedding day kiss. And for a moment they both froze, but then David hugged her back, and it felt natural instead of strange. Thank you, he said quietly. I couldn't have done this without your help? Yes, you could have. You just needed to tell the story differently. They separated, both suddenly aware of the boundaries they'd just crossed. But neither seemed upset about it. We should celebrate, David said. Let me take you to dinner, somewhere nice. Elena looked down at her jeans and t-shirt. I'm not exactly dressed for somewhere nice. Then we'll order pizza and celebrate here. Whatever you want. They ended up ordering Chinese food and eating it on the living room floor while watching old movies. Elena told David about her final exam the next day, and he helped her review flashcards for medical terminology. It felt like the most normal evening they'd ever spent together. Elena, David said during a quiet moment between movies. Can I ask you something? Sure. Are you happy here? I mean, with this arrangement? Sometimes I wonder if you feel trapped. Elena considered the question seriously. 6 months ago, she'd been working double shifts and struggling to afford textbooks. Now she was on track to finish her prerequisites ahead of schedule and apply to nursing programs. But it was more than that. I don't feel trapped, she said. Finally, for the first time in years, I feel like I have choices. Like I can actually plan for the future instead of just surviving day to day. Good. That's what I was hoping for. What about you? Elena asked. Any regrets about marrying a stranger? David was quiet for a moment. You're not a stranger anymore. Something in his voice made Elena look at him more carefully. There was an expression on his face she couldn't quite read. David? I've been thinking lately about what happens when you finish school. When you don't need this arrangement anymore. Elena's stomach tightened. She'd been trying not to think about that. What about it? I guess I'm wondering if you'll want to leave right away. Find someone you actually chose to be with. The question hung between them like a challenge. Elena realized she'd been avoiding thinking about the future because she wasn't sure what she wanted anymore. I don't know, she said honestly. This whole situation is more complicated than I thought it would be. Complicated how? Elena struggled to find words for feelings she wasn't sure she should be having. When we started this, it was supposed to be simple, a business arrangement. But living with someone, sharing a life with them, it changes things. David nodded. Slowly, it does. I care about your success, Elena admitted. I worry when you're stressed. I look forward to our conversations at dinner. That wasn't supposed to happen. No, it wasn't. They sat in silence for a while, both apparently trying to figure out what their admission meant. Elena, David said finally, I need to tell you something. And I need you to know I'm not saying it to pressure you or change our arrangement. Elena's heart started beating faster. Okay. I think I'm falling in love with you. The words hit Elena like a physical blow. She'd been sensing something changing between them, but hearing it said out loud made it real in a way that terrified her. David, I know we agreed this would. Stayed businesslike. I know you married me for practical reasons, not romantic ones. 2 years had flown by faster than Elena ever imagined possible. The nursing program had been everything the acceptance letter promised, intense, challenging, and absolutely exhausting. But Elena had thrived in ways she never expected. She discovered she had a natural talent for patient care, especially with children who'd been through trauma similar to her own. The pediatric burn unit at the hospital had become her second home during clinical rotations. Kids who came in scared and hurting somehow relaxed when Elena was around. Maybe it was because she understood their fear, or maybe it was because she never looked at them with pity in her eyes. Elena, can you help with the new patient in room 12? Asked Patricia, the head nurse. 7-year-old boy, house fire. Last week he's been refusing to let anyone change his bandages. Elena nodded and grabbed the supplies. She'd done this dance dozens of times before. Walking into room 12, she found a small boy huddled under blankets, his mother sitting beside him with red-rimmed eyes. Hi there, Elena said softly, sitting in the chair across from the bed. I'm Elena. I'm one of the nurses here. The boy peeked out from under his blanket. Half his face was covered in bandages, and Elena could see the fear in his one visible. I know you're scared, Elena said. I was scared too when I was in a hospital bed like yours. You were? The boy whispered. Elena gently touched the left side of her face, where her own scars caught the afternoon light coming through the window. I was 16 when I got hurt in a fire. I was so scared of everything, the doctors, the bandage changes. Even looking in the mirror. The boy's mother looked surprised, probably noticing Elena's scars for the first time. Did it hurt? The boy asked. It did hurt, Elena said honestly. But you know what I learned? The bandage changes actually help you heal faster. And the doctors and nurses here, they're really good at making it hurt as little as possible. 20 minutes later, Elena had successfully changed the boy's bandages while he told her about his pet hamster and his favorite video games. It was moments like these that reminded Elena why she'd chosen nursing, why all the years of struggle had been worth it. After her shift, Elena drove home feeling tired but satisfied. She pulled into the driveway of the house that had become truly hers over the past 2 years. David had insisted on adding her name to the deed 6 months ago, saying it was only fair since she'd contributed so much to making it a real home. David's car was already in the garage, which meant he was probably in his office finishing up work. Elena found him exactly where she expected, hunched over his computer with papers scattered across his desk. How was your day? David asked, looking up with a smile that still made Elena's heart skip a little. Good, challenging. A new burn patient came in today, a little boy. Reminded me why I love this job. David saved his work and turned to face her completely. You're amazing with those kids. The way you connect with them. It's like watching magic happen. Elena felt her cheeks warm at the compliment. Even after all this time, David's praise still meant everything to her. What about you? How's the Henderson project coming along? Actually finished it today, 3 weeks ahead of schedule. David stood up and stretched, which means I have some free time for the first time in months. Free time? What's that? Elena joked. I was thinking maybe we could take a vacation. Nothing fancy, just a long weekend somewhere. You've been working so hard with school and the hospital. You deserve a break." The suggestion caught Elena off guard. In the 2 years they'd been married, they'd never taken a trip together. Their relationship had grown closer and warmer, but they'd maintained careful boundaries. Separate bedrooms, separate schedules, shared meals and conversation, but nothing that looked too much like a real marriage. "I don't know," Elena said. "I've got clinical rotations next week and there's that big exam coming up. Elena." David's voice was gentle but firm. "When's the last time you did something just for fun? Something that wasn't related to school or work?" Elena thought about it and realized she couldn't remember. Even her free time was usually spent studying or catching up on sleep. "Maybe you're right," she admitted. "I know a place about 2 hours north of here. Small town by a lake. Bed and breakfast kind of place. Very quiet, very relaxing." "Separate rooms?" Elena asked automatically. David's expression flickered with something disappointment, but he nodded. "Of course. Whatever makes you comfortable." That Friday afternoon, they drove north through rolling hills and farmland Elena had never seen before. David had been right about it being peaceful. The small town had one main street lined with antique shops and cafes, and the lake stretched out like a mirror reflecting the sky. The bed and breakfast was a converted Victorian house with wraparound porches and gardens that looked like something from a magazine. The owner, a cheerful woman in her 60s, showed them to their rooms on the second floor. "You're in the Rose Room, dear," she told Elena, opening a door to reveal a cozy space with flowered wallpaper and a four-poster bed. "And your husband is right next door in the Blue Room." Elena didn't correct her assumption about their relationship. It was easier to let people think they were a normal married couple than to explain their unusual arrangement. That evening, they had dinner at a small restaurant overlooking the lake. Elena couldn't remember the last time she'd felt so relaxed. No textbooks to read, no patients to worry about, no schedule to keep. Just good food, easy conversation, and David's undivided attention. "Thank you for this," Elena said as they walked along the lake after dinner. "I didn't realize how much I needed to get away." "You've been pushing yourself pretty hard." "I've been worried about you." Elena looked at him in surprise. "Worried how? You barely sleep. You study until midnight and then get up at 5 for your hospital shifts. You eat lunch standing up in the kitchen while reviewing notes. When's the last time you just sat still and did nothing?" Elena realized David had been paying closer attention to her daily life than she'd thought. "I guess I've gotten used to being busy. It's hard to slow down, I know. But you don't have to prove anything anymore, Elena. You're already succeeding. You can ease up a little." They found a bench overlooking the water and sat down. The sun was setting, painting the lake in shades of orange and pink. It was beautiful and peaceful, and exactly what Elena hadn't known she needed. "David," Elena said quietly, "can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we'd met under normal circumstances? If Tommy hadn't? If we'd just met randomly somewhere?" David considered the question seriously. "I think about that sometimes, but honestly, I don't think you would have given me a second look." "Why not?" "Because you're strong and independent in a way. Too smart to settle for some boring software guy who spends all his time with computers." Elena turned to look at him. "You're not boring, David, and you're definitely not just anything." "But I know I'm not exactly Prince Charming material." Prince Charming is overrated," Elena said. "I'd rather have someone reliable and kind and patient. Someone who helps me study for exams and celebrates my victories and brings me coffee in the morning without being asked." David met her eyes. "Elena, someone who took a chance on a scared, broken girl and gave her the space to become who she was meant to be. You were never broken, you were just waiting for the right opportunity." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the last rays of sunlight disappear behind the trees. Elena felt something shifting inside her, walls she'd built carefully over 2 years starting to crack. "I need to tell you something," Elena said finally. "Okay. I think I've been lying to myself about what this is between us." David's breathing seemed to stop. "What do you mean?" "When we got married, I told myself it was just business. a practical arrangement to solve my problems. And for a while that's all it was. Elena took a shaky breath. But somewhere along the way, it became something else. And I've been too scared to admit it. Elena ... I love you, David. The words came out in a rush, like she had to say them quickly before she lost her nerve. Not grateful love or friend love. Real love, the kind that scares me because I don't know what I'd do if I lost it. David was quiet for so long that Elena started to panic. Maybe she'd misread everything. Maybe his kindness and care were just duty, not love. I've been waiting 2 years to hear you say that, David said finally, his voice rough with emotion. Really? Elena, I fell in love with you about 6 months after our wedding, but I didn't want to pressure you or make you feel trapped. I figured if you ever felt the same way, you'd let me know. Elena laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. We're both idiots. Probably, but we're idiots who love each other. David reached over and took her hand, interlacing their fingers. It was such a simple gesture, but it felt monumental after 2 years of careful distance. So what happens now? Elena asked. Now we figure out how to be married to each other for real, if that's what you want? Elena looked at their joined hands, then at David's face in the fading light. For the first time since she was 16 years old, the future looked bright and full of possibilities. Yeah, she said softly, that's what I want. As they walked back to the bed and breakfast, Elena felt like she was finally coming home to herself. 3 months after their confession at the lake, Elena and David had settled into a new kind of happiness. They'd moved David's belongings into Elena's room, or rather what had become their room. The house felt different now, warmer somehow, filled with the kind of easy intimacy that comes when two people finally stop pretending they don't belong together. Elena had graduated from nursing school 2 weeks ago, finishing at the top of her class. The ceremony had been small but perfect, with David cheering loudly from the audience when her name was called. She'd accepted a full-time position in the pediatric burn unit at the same hospital where she'd done her clinical rotations, everything. And Elena's life was finally falling into place, which was why the phone call at 2:47 a.m. terrified her so completely. David answered on the third ring, his voice thick with sleep. Hello? Elena couldn't hear the other end of the conversation, but she watched David's face change from confusion to alarm. We'll be right there, David said, already reaching for his clothes. What's wrong? Elena asked, her heart pounding. Fire at the hospital. Major chemical spill in the East Wing. They're evacuating patients and calling in all available staff. Elena was out of bed and pulling on her scrubs before David finished speaking. This was exactly the kind of emergency she'd trained for. But actually facing it felt completely different than reading about it in textbooks. The drive to the hospital was eerily quiet. Emergency vehicles filled the streets, their red and blue, lights cutting through the pre-dawn darkness. Elena could see smoke rising from one section of the hospital complex, and her stomach knotted with anxiety. You don't have to do this, David said as they pulled into the hospital parking lot. You just graduated. Nobody expects you to run toward danger on your second week of work. Yes, they do. This is what I signed up for. Elena squeezed his hand. I'll be careful, I promise. The hospital was controlled chaos. Patients were being moved to safe areas while staff worked quickly to contain whatever had caused the chemical spill. Elena reported to the charge nurse, who looked relieved to see her. Elena, thank God, we need you in the temporary pediatric area. We've moved all the kids to the West Wing, but they're scared and some of them need specialized burn care. Elena nodded and hurried toward the West Wing, where she found 23 children ranging from toddlers to teenagers, all displaced from their rooms and frightened by the commotion. Several were her regular patients from the burn unit, kids she'd been working with for months. Miss Elena called out Jake, the 7-year-old she'd helped when he first arrived. What's happening? Are we going to be okay? Everyone's going to be fine, Elena said, projecting calm confidence even though her own heart was racing. There was just a little accident with some cleaning chemicals, and the doctors want to make sure everyone stays safe while they fix it. over. The next several hours, Elena worked alongside 2 other nurses to keep the children calm and comfortable. They set up temporary beds, administered medications, and most importantly, provided the kind of reassurance that only comes from someone who genuinely cares. Around 6 a.m., the situation took a turn for the worse. The chemical spill had caused more damage than originally thought, and the entire East Wing would need to be evacuated. That included the intensive care unit, where several critical patients couldn't be moved easily. "We need volunteers to help with the ICU evacuation," announced Dr. Rodriguez over the intercom. "Only experienced staff. This is potentially dangerous." Elena looked at the pediatric patients she'd been caring for. They were stable now, and the other nurses could handle their care. The ICU patients needed all the help they could get. "I'll be right back," Elena told her colleague. "Keep an eye on Jake. He gets anxious when he doesn't see familiar faces." Elena made her way through the maze of hallways toward the ICU. The air was getting thicker, and she could smell the acrid scent of whatever chemicals had spilled. Emergency responders were working to contain the spread, but it was clearly a serious situation. In the ICU, Elena found organized chaos. Doctors and nurses were carefully moving patients on ventilators, monitors beeping constantly as they tried to maintain critical care in impossible circumstances. "Elena, grab that 4-pump, called out Dr. Martinez, the attending physician. "We need to move Mrs. Patterson to the surgical wing." For the next 3 hours, Elena worked harder than she ever had in her life. Moving critical patients required precision, teamwork, and constant vigilance. One wrong move could be fatal for someone already fighting for their life. Elena was helping transfer an elderly man on a ventilator when the emergency alarm sounded again. The chemical reaction had intensified, and everyone in the East Wing needed to evacuate immediately. "Go," Dr. Martinez told Elena. "We've got this patient. Get out of here." "There are still 2 more patients to move," Elena protested. "Elena, that's an order. Evacuate now." Elena looked around the ICU. Most of the patients had been successfully moved, but she could see 2 rooms where teams were still working frantically to disconnect life support equipment safely. She had a choice: follow orders and leave to safety, or stay and help with the final evacuations. Elena thought about David, probably pacing in the hospital lobby, worried sick about her safety. She thought about the promise she'd made to be careful. She thought about the new life they were building together, all the plans they'd made. Then she thought about the patients who might die if there weren't enough hands to help move them safely. "I'm staying," Elena said firmly. Dr. Martinez started to argue, but Elena was already moving toward the first room. Inside, she found a young mother on a ventilator, surrounded by machines keeping her alive while her premature baby fought for life in the NICU upstairs. "What do you need me to do?" Elena asked the respiratory therapist. "Hold this steady while I disconnect the vent. We have to move her in the next 5 minutes or we're all in serious trouble." Elena's hands were rock steady as she held the woman's breathing tube in place. Around them, the air was getting harder to breathe, and she could hear the evacuation alarms growing more urgent. They got the woman moved to safety with minutes to spare. Elena immediately turned to help with the last patient, a teenage boy who'd been in a car accident and needed careful spinal immobilization during the move. By the time they wheeled the final patient out of the danger zone, Elena was exhausted, covered in sweat and breathing hard from the chemical fumes. But everyone had made it out alive. Elena stumbled toward the main lobby, where families were waiting for news about their loved ones. She was looking for David when she heard someone calling her name. "Elena! Elena!" She turned to see David pushing through the crowd, his face pale with worry and relief. "Are you insane?" he demanded, pulling her into a fierce hug. "Do you have any idea how scared I was? They said the East Wing was being evacuated hours ago, and you never came out." "I'm sorry," Elena said, her voice muffled against his shoulder. "There were patients who needed help. I couldn't just leave them." David pulled back to look at her, his hands on her shoulders. "Elena, you could have died in there. You could have been seriously hurt, but I wasn't. Everyone made it out safely." "That's not the point." David's voice cracked with emotion. The point is that you risked your life unnecessarily? You're not invincible, Elena. You're not required to save everyone. Elena stared at him, surprised by the intensity of his reaction. David, this is my job. This is what nurses do. Your job is to care for patients safely, not to run into dangerous situations when you've been ordered to evacuate. Those people would have died if I'd left. And you would have died if that chemical reaction had gotten worse. David ran his hands through his hair in frustration. Do you think I could live with that? Do you think I could go on knowing I'd lost you because you felt like you had to be a hero? Elena felt a flash of anger. I wasn't trying to be a hero. I was trying to do my job. Your job doesn't require you to sacrifice yourself. Sometimes it does. They stared at each other across a divide that had opened up suddenly between them. Elena could see David's fear and love warring in his expression, but she could also see something else, a fundamental disagreement about who she was and what she was capable of. Elena, David said quietly, I can't watch you do this. I can't. Sit at home wondering if each shift is going to be the one where you don't come back. What are you saying? I'm saying that maybe we need to think about whether this is really the right career for you. There are other ways to help people that don't involve putting yourself in danger. Elena felt like she'd been slapped. Are you asking me to quit nursing? I'm asking you to think about what's really important. Your safety, our future together, the life we're building. Nursing is what's important to me, David. It's who I am. It's what I've worked toward for years. More important than us? The question hung in the air between them like a challenge. Elena looked at David's face and saw genuine fear there, but also something that looked almost like an ultimatum. I can't believe you're making me choose, Elena said softly. I'm not making you choose. I'm asking you to be reasonable. Reasonable? Elena's voice rose slightly. It's reasonable to expect me to give up everything I've worked for because you're scared. It's reasonable to expect my wife to care about her own safety. 3 weeks passed after the hospital emergency, and Elena and David lived in their house like careful strangers. They spoke politely about practical things. Who would buy groceries? What time Elena would be home from work, whether David needed the car for meetings. But the easy warmth that had filled their home for months was gone. Replaced by an uncomfortable tension that neither seemed to know how to break, Elena threw herself into her work at the pediatric burn unit. Every day brought new challenges. New patients who needed her skills and experience. She told herself this was enough, that helping children heal was worth any personal sacrifice. But late at night, lying alone in what had once been their shared bedroom, she missed David so much it felt like a physical ache. David had moved back to his old room down the hall. He worked longer hours than usual, often staying in his office until Elena was already asleep. When they did cross paths, he was polite but distant, like he was protecting himself from caring too much. On a rainy Thursday morning, Elena was reviewing patient charts when Dr. Martinez approached her with a serious expression. Elena, I need to talk to you about something important. Is everything okay? That's what I want to discuss. What you did during the chemical emergency 3 weeks ago, staying behind to help with the evacuations after you were ordered to leave. Elena's stomach tightened. Did I do something wrong? Actually, quite the opposite. Your actions saved lives that night. The review board has recommended you for a commendation for exceptional courage under dangerous circumstances. Elena stared at him in surprise. A commendation? You're also being considered for the head nurse position in our new trauma response team. It would be a significant promotion, but it would involve more emergency situations like the one we just experienced. Elena felt a mix of pride and confusion. This was the kind of recognition she dreamed about, proof that she belonged in this profession. But she also thought about David's face that night, the fear and anger in his eyes. Can I think about it? Of course. But Elena, I want you to know that what you did took real courage. Not everyone would have made the choice you made. That evening, Elena came home to find David's car in the driveway, but the house strangely quiet. She found him in the living room, sitting on the couch with a manila envelope in his hands. David? Is everything okay? He looked up at her with an expression she couldn't read. I've been thinking about what happened at the hospital, about our fight afterward. Elena sat down on the other end of the couch, maintaining careful distance. And I was wrong. David's voice was quiet but clear. I was scared, and I let that fear make me say things I shouldn't have said. David ... Let me finish. He held up the envelope. I've been doing some research. Reading about nurses who've won awards for courage, medical professionals who've risked their lives to save others. And I realized something. Elena waited, her heart beating faster. I fell in love with you because of who you are. Your strength. Your determination, your refusal to give up when people need you. But then I turned around and asked you to stop being exactly the person I fell in love with. Elena felt tears starting in her eyes. You were scared. I understand that. Being scared is one thing. Asking you to change who you are because of my fear is something else entirely. David opened the envelope and pulled out several sheets of paper. These are divorce papers. Elena's heart stopped. What? I had them drawn up last week. I thought maybe if I couldn't handle being married to someone as brave as you, then I should set you free to be with someone who could. Elena stared at the papers in David's hands, feeling like the world was collapsing around her. Is that what you want, a divorce? No. David's voice was firm. That's the last thing I want. But I realize that our marriage can't work if I'm constantly trying to keep you from being who you're meant to be. Elena watched as David stood up and walked to the fireplace. Without hesitation, he tossed the divorce papers into the flames. I choose you, Elena, all of you. The nurse who runs toward danger instead of away from it. The woman who cares more about saving lives than protecting herself. The person who's braver than I'll ever be. Elena was crying now, overwhelmed by relief, and love, and something that felt like coming home after a long journey. David, I was so scared you'd leave, I thought I'd lost you. You could never lose me. I just had to figure out how to love you the way you deserve to be loved. Elena stood up and walked over to him, and for the first time in 3 weeks, David pulled her into his arms. I'm sorry I scared you that night, Elena whispered against his shoulder. I'm sorry I made you think I don't care about what happens to me. I'm sorry I asked you to choose between your calling and our marriage. That was unfair and wrong. They held each other in front of the fireplace, watching the divorce papers turn to ash. Elena, David said softly, there's something else I need to tell you. What? Today is the anniversary of Tommy's death. 3 years ago today, he asked me to take care of you. Elena had forgotten the date in all the stress and conflict of recent weeks. 3 years. I've been thinking about what he would say. If he could see us now? If he could see the incredible nurse you've become, the lives you've saved, the courage you show every single day. He'd probably say we're both crazy for making things so complicated, David laughed softly. He'd also say he was right about you being braver than both of us combined. Elena pulled back to look at David's face. What he asked you to do, take care of me, you've done that. You gave me the chance to become who I was meant to be. No, Elena, you did that yourself. I just got lucky enough to be along for the ride. Elena thought about the girl who'd married a stranger 3 years ago, desperate and scared and convinced she'd never deserve real love. That girl felt like a different person now, someone from another lifetime. I got the commendation, Elena said, for the night of the emergency, and they offered me a promotion to head the new trauma response team. David's face lit up with pride. Elena, that's incredible. Are you going to take it? I want to. But it means more situations like the one that scared you so much. David took her hands in his. Then take it. Use your skills to help as many people as you can. I'll learn to live with the fear because I believe in what you're doing. You're sure? I'm sure, but I have one condition. Elena raised an eyebrow. What's that? Promise me you'll be as careful as you can while still doing your job. I can handle you being brave, but I need to know you're not being reckless. I promise. And David, I have a condition too. Okay. Promise me that if you get scared, you'll talk to me about it instead of pulling away. We're partners now, really? And truly, that means we face things together, I promise. Elena looked around the living room that had become their sanctuary, the home they'd built together from nothing but Tommy's dying wish and their own willingness to take a chance on something. Impossible. You know what I think Tommy would say if he could see us now? Elena asked. What? I think he'd say his plan worked out even better than he hoped. He wanted you to take care of me, but what he really gave us was the chance to take care of each other. David smiled and kissed her gently. Your brother was a smart man. Yeah, he was. He knew exactly what he was doing when he brought us together. Later that evening they drove to the cemetery where Tommy was buried. Elena placed fresh flowers on his grave while David stood quietly beside her. Thank you, Elena whispered to the headstone, for knowing what I needed before I knew it myself, for trusting David with your crazy plan, for believing I was worth saving. As they walked back to their car, Elena felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced since Tommy died. The scared girl who'd agreed to marry a stranger was finally, completely gone. In her place was a woman who knew exactly who she was and what she was capable of. She was Elena Martinez, registered nurse, wife, and survivor. She was someone who ran toward danger to help others, who loved deeply and without reservation, who had learned that the bravest thing you can do is trust someone else with your heart. She was exactly who Tommy had always believed she could become, and for the first time since she was 16 years old, Elena knew without a doubt that she was exactly where she belonged.